समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
As we record this episode of ThePrint Security Code, incredible news is emerging from Gaza. After 2 years of savage war following the terrorist attacks of October 7, a ceasefire is going into place. Aid will begin to flow to victims early next week, leading on to a second phase where there are supposed to be political negotiations that might finally give the Palestinians a political settlement, even an independent state. The end of the war itself is real progress, but many are wondering what happens next. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. I'll be talking you through the complex, deep cultural questions that Israelis and Palestinians will have to confront if they're to make this ceasefire the foundation for a genuine, lasting peace. Like the cursed villages of some ancient fables, the village of Hajj was erased one summer afternoon. Its mud brick huts, its water wheel well, and its 150 odd families disappearing into history. Later, Ariel Sharon, the Israeli general who served as the country's prime minister from 2001 to 2006, purchased that very land to build Havat Shikmim, or Sycamore Ranch, so named for the trees that grew wild there. The broken remnants of the village's abandoned mosque, one visitor recorded, were converted into a stable for the general's thoroughbred horses. 2 years ago, this Tuesday past, under the cover of a barrage of rockets, 41 Palestinian terrorists tore through the fencing separating Gaza from the land that was once Hajj, killing dozens of people, most of them civilians. The Hamas terrorists occupied the police station, setting off a battle that ended only after tanks and helicopters were called in to fire missiles and shells. As negotiators meet to hammer out an end to the savage war that followed, the story of how the village of Hajj became the Israeli city of Sderot illustrates the unending sorrow and rage that are driving this conflict. Every day, journalist Lucas Minicini reported earlier this year, Israelis gather at an observation deck in Sderot to watch the war ravaging the Palestinian enclave. Among those at the receiving end are the descendants of those who once lived in Sderot. The story of Hajj, Sderot, whatever you want to call it, shows annihilation is not a solution to hatred. To live in peace, Israelis and Palestinians must find a way to move beyond a ceasefire and share not just land, but a common destiny. Founded in 1820 by the Ottoman governor of Gaza, Mustafa Bey, the village of Hajj lay between two hills in the Negev desert, at the crossroads of ancient trade routes between Gaza and Beersheba. Like Israel's Zionist founding patriarchs a century later, Mustafa Bey populated the village by offering the new Bedouin settlers free land and setting up a local police station to guarantee security. The new Arab settlers grew figs, grapes, and apricots along with cereals and tended to their herds of sheep, historian Walid Khalidi recorded. The oldest map of historical Palestine, a floor mosaic you can now find at the Church of St. George in Jordan's Madaba, suggests that Hajj was in existence much earlier though, from at least 6 BC, one civilization layering itself over the other. In 1892, interestingly, French explorer Victor Guérin noted the remnants of grey marble columns near the village's main well, perhaps remnants of some ancient monument or a nobleman's house. In 1917, the British Empire defeated the Ottomans and Germans in the third of a year-long series of battles over Gaza, opening the way for the British capture of Jerusalem. That year, British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour promised the banker and conservative politician Lionel Rothschild a Jewish, I quote, national home in Palestine. The term national home, unknown in international law, was a deliberately vague choice. In 1915, you see, 2 years earlier, the British High Commissioner to Egypt, Henry McMahon, who's also the author of the controversial border line between Tibet and India, over which so much blood has been shed, had made a parallel promise to Hussein bin Ali, the ruler of Mecca, promising Arab independence in his territories. This led the Arabs to revolt against the Ottoman Empire in 1916. The Arabs were unaware that the United Kingdom, France and Russia had already concluded a secret agreement to carve up the Ottoman Empire's Arab territories instead of returning them to the Sharif of Mecca. From 1883, Jewish settlers had been arriving in Palestine, buying land from local Arabs to set up agricultural settlements. The movement had the financial support of Baron Edmund de Rothschild of the famous Rothschild family, who believed Jewish life in Palestine depended on the foundations of profitable farming. The number of settlers accelerated sharply in the 1930s in response to growing anti-Semitism and the rising spectre of fascism in Europe. The settlement closest to Hajj, Doron, was set up in 1941, after the Second World War began. The work of the eminent historian Benny Morris shows that the Arab residents of Hajj, like quite a few across Palestine, had a friendly relationship with the new settlers. The settlers needed land, of course, but they also needed labor, which communities like the one in Hajj happily provided. Indeed, in 1946, the residents of Hajj sheltered members of the Zionist militia Haganah, which would later become the Israeli Defense Forces, in the face of a British military crackdown. And in mid-December 1947, the headman of Hajj was murdered along with his brother by a mob in Gaza, who accused them of being too pro-Jewish. From mid-May 1948, though, Egyptian forces began to advance through Gaza in the First Arab-Israeli War. And the attitudes of Israelis changed. Even if the residents of villages like Hajj had been supportive of the Zionists, their presence was now seen as posing a strategic threat. Troops of Israel's Negev Brigade, among the formations which fought at Sderot during the October 7 carnage 2 years ago, began a campaign of savage ethnic cleansing, expelling Arab villagers from regions northeast of Gaza. They soon realized they had a problem. The villagers fled in the face of force. They returned to their lands once Israeli troops withdrew, and there weren't enough soldiers to garrison these villages permanently. Thus, more brutal means began to be used to push Arab villagers into Gaza permanently. The Negev Brigade's 9th Battalion, Morris records, executed dozens of army-age men at the village of Bureir and raped a teenage girl. 5 men were shot dead after Israeli troops faced resistance from villagers in Sumsum, and the village's grain stores and well were dynamited. Even Arabs offering to accept Israeli sovereignty, Morris writes, suffered the same fate. The Dar Shurbaji clan in the village of Zarnuqa offered to surrender its weapons in return for being allowed to live on their lands. Late in May 1948, though, Israeli troops bombarded the village with mortar. The left-wing Israeli party Mapam's newspaper, Al-Hamishmar, reported that, and I quote, one of the soldiers opened a door and fired a sten at an old man, an old woman, and a child in one burst. Then, it was the turn of Hajj. Israel's intelligence services dismissed fears that these embittered refugees would turn into a permanent threat to the new Israeli state. The burden would instead fall on Arab states, who would have to bear the economic and political costs of refugee flows into their territory, the argument went. To Israel's intelligence services, it seemed that the violence of 1948 had crushed their opponents once and for all. I quote, "The Arab emigrant did not turn into a fighter. His only interest now is in collecting money," argues one intelligence analysis discovered by the historian Ilan Pape. He has resigned himself to the lowest form of life. Events have shown that this was a catastrophic miscalculation. From 1955, tensions began to rise in Gaza again, when a military raid by Ariel Sharon, then a young military officer, claimed the lives of 38 Palestinians. Through the 1970s, the nationalist organization Al-Fatah conducted a series of terrorist attacks into Israel from Gaza. The group's eventual failure in the 1980s ceded space to Islamists represented by Hamas. As Hamas grew more powerful, Sderot came under relentless attack from homemade rockets, some landing even as President Barack Obama visited the city in 2013. Israel's operations since 7 October have demonstrated that force isn't fixing its problems this time either. Estimates made by the United States scholar Raphael Cohen suggest Hamas has been able to recruit some 15,000 new personnel since the war began, replacing much of the rank and file it has lost to Israeli attacks. The organization's structure also seemed to have survived the killing of its top leadership, and swathes of the tunnel network it uses to launch attacks and shelter from airstrikes still survive. Leila Surat, a French expert on Hamas, argues that the organization is in fact succeeding in drawing Israel into an unwinnable war in Gaza. Far from being a sign of weakness, she suggests, Hamas's prompt acceptance of US peace proposals is part of a longer-term plan to make the organization invisible and operate from amid the midst of an immiserated, desperate and angry population. Some Arabs did succeed in remaining in southern Israel after 1948 and built lives as Israelis. Their descendants included Amir Abu Sabila, who saved a mother and her 2 children during the October 7 attacks on Sderot at the cost of his own life. The story shows that the tragedies of 1948 don't have to be destiny. The talks in Egypt, it's likely, will lead to at least a break in the war. Who knows, maybe even its final end. But unless Israelis and Arabs can find a way to live together, they are unlikely to mark the beginning of peace. That task might seem impossible, but the alternative to living together is endless war and endless killing. I'm Praveen Swami. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.